Imagine once being worshipped by millions, and then hiding from the world, terrified of your own reflection, too afraid to step outside in case someone photographed you. From making $10,000 every single day in the 90s to becoming one of the most iconic faces of the supermodel era, Linda Evangelista had it all: fame, money, and beauty that defined an entire generation. She was fashion's most legendary chameleon. She was a phenomenon on the cover of every magazine, in the campaigns of every luxury brand. Vogue crowned her the most beautiful woman in the world. A single haircut from Linda could change global beauty standards overnight. That's how untouchable she was. But what happens when the world's most powerful supermodel loses everything? There were toxic rivalries, whispered affairs, and a troubled marriage to a billionaire who would later be accused of being a predator in a shocking paternity case that ended in legal drama. But the most devastating chapter came later. Linda quietly underwent a cosmetic procedure to maintain her iconic figure, but something went horribly wrong. The procedure triggered a rare side effect, leaving her permanently altered. What was meant to be a touch-up became a nightmare, distorting her appearance and destroying her self-image.
Am I exaggerating if I call that a deformity?
But the question is, how did a woman at the very top lose everything so quickly? Why did the industry that once worshipped her suddenly turn its back? What really happened in the surgery that changed her face and her life forever? And most importantly, how did Linda find the strength to rise again and expose the fashion industry after years of silence? This is the raw, glamorous, and haunting story of Linda Evangelista. But before all of that, of course, we are doing some background. The girl before the goddess. Born on May 10th, 1965, in St. Catharines, Ontario, Linda was raised in a strict, working-class Italian Catholic household. Her father worked at General Motors, and her mother, Marisa, was a bookkeeper. There was no glamour in her early life, just family, tradition, and the quiet ache of wanting more. From an early age, Linda was different. While other kids played sports or daydreamed about movie stars, she found herself drawn to beauty. She began collecting magazine covers, cutting out photos of models she admired, and taping them to her bedroom walls like they were windows into another world. Modeling wasn't just a fantasy, it was the dream. Her first taste of modeling came early. At age 12, she enrolled in a local modeling school. But it wasn't the fun, glamorous experience she expected. During one of the classes, an instructor told the girls to remove their clothes so they could be critiqued in their swimsuits. Linda refused. She left the class in tears. That moment could have ended her modeling dreams, but instead, it sparked a deeper fire. At age 16, she entered the Miss Teen Niagara beauty pageant, and although she didn't win, she caught the attention of a scout from Elite Model Management. They encouraged her to come to New York, and eventually, she was sent to Paris to start her international modeling career. It was a terrifying leap. Paris didn't make it easy for her. The city was cold, the apartments were cramped, and the competition was brutal. At barely 18, Linda Evangelista found herself navigating a world that was far from glamorous, standing in casting lines that wrapped around the block, living off cheap bread and coffee, barely fluent in French, and walking into an industry known for chewing up girls and spitting them out, constantly being told she was too unconventional for the classic beauty ideals of the early 80s. But Linda was not a girl easily broken. She had left her small-town life in St. Catharines, Ontario, behind for a reason. She didn't just want to be a model. She wanted to be the best. And even in those early days, she was watching everything. While others partied or clung to momentary trends, Linda studied light, fabric, movement. She practiced in front of mirrors. She was working to become unforgettable. By the mid-1980s, that work started paying off. She began landing campaigns with labels like Kenzo, L'Oreal, and Oscar de la Renta. She was booking editorials in European fashion magazines, walking in shows during Fashion Week, and shooting commercials on both sides of the Atlantic. She was slowly becoming a recognizable face within the fashion industry, and her reputation? Impeccable. Linda was never late. She never complained. She showed up early to set and could change her energy on command. Soft and romantic one minute, sharp and dangerous the next. Linda Evangelista was climbing, but still, she wasn't iconic yet. And then, 1987 changes everything. In 1987, Linda married Gerald Marie, a man 20 years her senior, and one of the most powerful men in fashion. As the head of Elite Model Management Europe, he wasn't just running the business, he was running the girls. He decided who got scouted, who got signed, who got booked. He had access, control, and a godlike grip on the careers of thousands of hopeful models. And Linda, the most sought-after face in the world, was married to him. To the public, it looked like a perfect match, but behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. Years later, Linda would reveal that her marriage to Gerald was abusive and suffocating. "I knew I had to leave," she would later say, "but I was afraid of his power, afraid of what would happen if she spoke out." She would freeze when he entered the room. She was scared to speak. Despite all of the harm, she was about to become his money-making machine, because Linda was ready to take a leap no one could have ever imagined. In 1988, photographer Peter Lindbergh suggested a radical idea during a shoot: cut your hair short. At that time, Linda had the long commercial brunette locks that fit the industry standard. Her agency was adamant. She'd lose bookings, but Linda wasn't playing it safe anymore. She walked into a Parisian salon and came out with a razor-sharp boyish crop that exposed her face like never before. The look was stark, bold, modern. It was a risk, and the consequences were immediate. Within days, she lost 16 jobs. Designers panicked. Her agency was furious. Clients dropped her from campaigns.
When I first cut my hair off and I went to Milano to do the shows, I was booked for like 20 shows. So 15 of them canceled me.
But Linda didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She owned it. And then something incredible happened. The exact haircut that got her rejected became her trademark. The haircut didn't just change Linda's career. It changed the beauty standard. Soon, women all over Europe and North America were walking into salons and asking for the Linda cut. Magazine covers promoted it. Girls who once worshipped long, flowy hair were suddenly chopping it all off to channel that same fearless energy. That single style, a defiant act of self-reinvention, set off a global trend. That was the moment the transformation was complete. Linda Evangelista was no longer just a model. She had become an icon. Her collaboration with Steven Meisel became one of the most legendary photographer-muse relationships in fashion history. Designers like Gianni Versace, Karl Lagerfeld, and Dolce & Gabbana began building collections around her. In 1990, she joined forces with Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, Cindy Crawford, and Tajana Patitz for Peter Lindbergh's iconic British Vogue cover. That image didn't just make history, it created the supermodel era. Together, these women became more than models. They became global icons. But even in that elite circle, Linda stood apart. She wasn't the sex symbol like Cindy. She wasn't the wild child like Naomi. She was something else, mysterious, versatile, unreachable. She could be ice-cold couture one day and high-glam Hollywood the next. And with her legendary quote, "We don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day, darling," Linda became fashion folklore. Models were no longer just hangers for clothes. They were stars. And Linda was the brightest among them. From a small bedroom filled with makeup and magazine clippings to the runways of Paris, Milan, and New York, Linda Evangelista had arrived, and fashion would never be the same again. But the higher you rise, the thinner the air gets. The supermodel era looked glossy on the outside, red carpets, champagne, limos, but behind the scenes, it was competitive, cutthroat, and filled with quiet feuds. There were whispers of Linda and Naomi butting heads, fighting over campaigns, cover placements, and who would close the most coveted runway shows. Everyone smiled for the cameras, but in the dressing rooms, it wasn't always so graceful. Linda, with her ice-cold beauty and surgical precision, became the model editors depended on. But that power made her a target. People called her demanding, intimidating, even difficult. But Linda never cared. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to be legendary. She was there to rule. But at the very height of her fame, Evangelista's personal life told a very different story. Behind the flawless magazine covers and million-dollar paychecks, she was trapped in an abusive marriage. For years, she silently endured pain that no amount of luxury could mask. Her husband, Gerald Marie, wasn't just controlling, he was violent. Linda endured years of physical and emotional abuse in silence, putting on a flawless face for the cameras while privately living a nightmare. He would beat her, humiliate her, and strip away her spirit, even as millions saw her as the embodiment of power and confidence on the runway. And Linda wasn't alone. Decades later, multiple women would step forward with chilling stories of harassment and abuse at the hands of Gerald Marie. When they spoke out, Linda stood with them, finally exposing the darkness of the man she had once been married to. The marriage ended in 1993, but the scars remained. Just as she tried to rebuild her life, another devastating blow followed. A miscarriage, the heartbreak of losing a child, coupled with the trauma of her past, left her shaken and vulnerable. She sought comfort in new relationships, with whispers of famous lovers filling tabloids, but true happiness always seemed to slip through her hands. While her career was soaring to unimaginable heights, Linda's personal life was filled with turmoil, loss, and disappointment. A reminder that even the most glamorous faces can hide the deepest wounds. But still, she showed up, campaign after campaign, runway after runway, perfect, polished, untouchable. No one knew what was happening behind the scenes, because Linda Evangelista never let them see her bleed. The fall, silence, surgery, and disappearance. As the fashion world entered the 2000s, the era of the supermodel began to dim. Reality TV stars and digital influencers slowly took center stage. Designers began chasing youth and novelty, and Linda Evangelista began to step out of the spotlight. She quietly took a step back from full-time modeling. She wasn't walking as many runways. The covers slowed, the campaigns thinned out, but no one thought it was a fall. It looked like a graceful retreat, the great Linda Evangelista taking a well-deserved rest after ruling fashion for nearly 2 decades. But the truth was much darker. Behind the scenes, Linda was battling something she never imagined, her own reflection. After decades of being praised for her face and body, the aging process wasn't just difficult, it was terrifying. In the mid-2010s, Linda underwent a series of cool sculpting procedures, a non-invasive fat reduction treatment promoted as a safer alternative to liposuction. She thought it would help maintain the figure that made her famous. But something went horribly wrong. Instead of reducing fat, Linda's body responded with a rare and cruel reaction called paradoxical adipose hyperplasia. The fat cells didn't disappear. They grew, hardened, multiplied. Her body changed in ways that were disfiguring, painful, and the worst part, it was irreversible. She underwent multiple corrective surgeries. None of them restored what was lost. She couldn't work. She couldn't face the cameras. The woman whose face had once defined beauty was now hiding it. Linda disappeared from public life. For nearly 6 years, she went into self-imposed exile. The fashion world moved on, barely asking where she went. And behind the silence, Linda was spiraling. She fell into a deep depression. Her confidence shattered. Her sense of self, the very foundation of her career, was gone. And what made it worse was the shame. She blamed herself for choosing the procedure, for trusting the wrong people. It wasn't until 2021 that Linda finally spoke. In a raw Instagram post, she revealed the full extent of her fat-freezing nightmare. For the first time in decades, Linda Evangelista let the world see her not as a model, but as a human being. Just when she thought she had survived the worst, life hit again. In 2018, Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent a double mastectomy and aggressive treatments. The battle was brutal. 4 years later, in 2022, the cancer returned. She described the moment in an interview with British Vogue. "I just wanted to put my head in the sand and not deal with it, but she did deal with it. Again, more surgery, more uncertainty, and still, no self-pity, no public breakdowns, just survival." And then, in the same year, something unexpected happened. British Vogue called. They wanted Linda Evangelista on the cover, not the retouched, airbrushed goddess from the 90s. They wanted her, the woman she had become, the survivor, the icon, the face of resilience. Linda agreed, but with a condition. She wanted her disfigurements covered with scarves, hats, and lighting. The trauma was still raw, but the statement was clear. She was back. The photo shoot was emotional, not just for Linda, but for the industry. That Vogue cover became more than just a comeback. It became a message that beauty changes, that survival can be elegant. Linda didn't return to be a supermodel again. She returned to be herself. In the end, Linda Evangelista is more than just a fashion icon. She is the story of what it costs to be worshipped. She climbed to the top of an industry that devours women. She shaped beauty standards and broke barriers. Linda Evangelista is not the same woman who ruled the 90s. She's something stronger. She's the woman who came back from silence and made it roar. And maybe that's the greatest legacy of all.